I don't know if it makes sense, but I don't care. I mean, we're experimenting. Hey guys, so Arturia just released Pigments 4, and I really wanted to do what's new in Pigments 4 because it's one of my favorite synthesizer, and I've done tons of videos on it, but I thought I'll do something else. I'm gonna go and just do a one-on-one. I mean, something very, very basic for people that are new to Pigments, and possibly if you're watching this and maybe you're not sure about how to use a synthesizer, so that's going to be a very helpful getting started guide. So let's get started. Right, so quick overview of the user interface, and then we'll dive into some concepts and things that you can do with this synthesizer and maybe other synthesizers. So first of all, we have four views, four main pages. So this is the synth page, and it is very detailed. And you can see here that we have two main engines. We have engine 1 and engine 2. They are identical in things that they can do, and they are the sound source. So that's where the sound starts. And we have different types of engines. So we have analog, right? And we have the wavetable, and you can change the wavetable, by the way, and they can be very complex. We'll talk about that in a moment. And then we can use this as a sampler, and we have different samples here. So you can change the underlying sample, right? And we also have harmonic, and that's really great. That's an amazing engine for sound. We'll let it run. So that's engine 1 and 2, and I'm going to talk about that in a moment. Then we also have a utility engine with some noise that you can have here, and other sounds. And now the next is, the next step would be to filter out or use a filter to shape the sound. So we'll talk about that later. We have two filters, and then we have a whole bunch of modulators that you can assign. So first we have the assignments and their values, whatever. And then below we have the actual modulators that you can tweak and change. So we'll talk about that. Modulators are devices that will let you automate things as you go. So for example, if you would like to have a sound going left and right, you can use a modulator that can be an LFO or a function. We'll see that in a moment, and things like that. So you can automate things, and that will create sounds that evolve over time. And so that's the synth view. There's more things here, like the filter routing, amp mode, things like that. Don't worry about it. We also have a simplified view, which is, by the way, new to Pigments 4. So here you can see the engines, engine 1, 2, the utility, you see the filters, you see the modulations in action, what's happening. And we also have some other controls, like even a keyboard and things like that, and the macros. But very simplified. So if you're using presets, if you're just going to flick through presets, let's just select something else. That's perfectly fine. You don't need to see anything. Maybe that's even better for you. Fun stuff. So next we have the effects. So When you're shaping the sound, part or very important part of the sound would be all kinds of effects. That could be reverbs, delays, distortion, filters, things that will take the sound and manipulate it, will add something to it. And we have two main effect lanes, we'll call it FXA and FXB, which each will have three different slots. And you can see that we are using reverb and compressor on FXA. And for FXB, you'll see that we have EQ, delay, and reverb. And then we have an auxiliary one, aux, that you can send the sounds in. And so the idea with the send, it goes in parallel to anything else, and the inserts are part of the chain. So that's the basics, and we'll talk about it more in a moment. Finally, we have a sequencer / arpeggiator, which is really great, and it can add a lot. I mean, you have the choice here to turn it on. So even if you're using whatever preset you're using, for example, this one, right? I'm gonna turn it on, and now you have a choice. Do you want this to be a sequencer or an arpeggiator? So arpeggiator will take whatever you're playing and arpeggiate through the different notes. So if you're playing a chord, it will just run through those notes, and it can also do some other things. And there's a lot to explore. And you have the ARP mode. So that's an arpeggiator, and you can see that we have choices. So we have up and down, for example. And then there are a lot of things that you can do here, and I'm actually explaining all of that in a separate video in my channel, and it is there. So I'm going to put the link to the entire course that I have, and you can find information there. Then the sequencer is a little bit different. It's in the same neighborhood, same idea, but different. So here you have a scale. So we have a scale, chromatic scale, going through all 12 notes, but you can go with a major scale. And now when I'm just trying to figure out a pattern, you'll see that I only get notes from that scale. If I go with natural minor, so only notes from that scale are available for me. And it's really, really helpful. So that's our pattern. And I can just trim that down, and then I'll have only 4 steps. Of course, we can change the rate. So you can see we are on 16th. I can go slower. I can even add some swing. And there are some other things that you can do here. So again, very, very cool stuff. And you will find all these components in almost any software synthesizer. Pretty much all synthesizers will have some kind of sound source, some kind of filters, some kind of modulators and effects. So all of that is very, very common. Now, because we are learning, and this is kind of a one-on-one lesson, we are going to go and set this to the default preset. So this is the very basic sound that you will get with Pigments. Let's have a listen. All right, so it sounds like a sine wave. And you can see that we are here on engine 1. That's the only engine that is turned on. And we also have the utility engine, but it doesn't do anything. The noises and the oscillators are closed. We can change this wavetable. I mean, it's on wavetable, but I can go and set this to analog. And here we have some basic waveforms. And well, that's going to affect in a major way the character of this sound. That's going to be how the waves are being generated, how the sound is generated. And there's a lot to learn about that. But we have some basic shapes. So let's have a quick listen and try to identify their character. All right, so that is a sawtooth, but we also have a sine wave. We have square, sounds hollow and brassy, woodwind maybe, right? And so you can use oscillator 1 and oscillator 2 and oscillator 3. This is the analog kind of synthesizer, but we also have wavetable. And the idea behind the wavetable is that we have different waves and they are stuck together, and I can just run through with the position and just go through those wave shapes. And it makes sense most of the time when you're automating this. So let me show you. So if we could find a way to do that automatically, and I don't need to do that with my mouse here, then that would be great. And in Pigments, and this is one of the best things about Pigments, is the assignment of modulations and how you program it. So you'll see we have several ways. I'm going to show you one or two. So we have the plus here. So I'm going to click this plus, and now I have a whole palette of modulators and options for me. And I'm going to use the LFO, which is the most common or one of the most common modulators alongside with envelopes, which we'll talk about. So I'm going to just go all the way up, and it will start going up and down. Right, and I can change the position here, the start position. It will start from the middle and go, just continue. But the question is, how do I set the rate, or how does it work? So I can go in the lower section here to LFOs, and we are using LFO 1, and you can see exactly what's happening. You see that little dot that goes, and if I'll use something else, for example, a sawtooth, then it will go and then flick immediately to the end, and we have the rate. So I can go faster. Now the rate goes in hertz, but I can lock that to my BPM and use this just in a different way. So I can sync this to hertz, or sync, or straight only, triplets only, dotted. Let's go with sync, and now you'll see all the choices. And that's how it goes. So that's very, very simple modulation. And I can do the same, for example, for the voice panning that I mentioned before. So I can go to the voice pan and just click this plus and use LFO2. And I don't have to go all the way. You can see the yellow arc, and you can also see that little dot going left and right on the voice pan. If you're listening to this in headphones or in your studio, then you definitely hear the left and right. So that's the basics here for the assignments. Let me show you another way for the assignments. So for example, we can use the filter to filter out some of the frequencies and also create some movement and something that evolves. So the filter filters out or boost or do something to the frequencies. So when the engine works, it produces sound. Sound is all over the place, can be around the entire range of frequencies, but the filter will filter or boost or cut or do something with the range of frequencies. So let's have a quick listen. We have the multi-mode, but look at this. I'm going to click this. You'll see that we have in Pigments so many options. We have the multi-mode, and we have the MS-20, the stem. So each one will have its own character. Now, Pigments takes a lot of its building blocks from other synthesizers, Arturia released over the years. And you can find the Jupe 8, you'll find the Mini, you'll find the MS-20. All these components are part of other Arturia's recreation of famous synthesizer, analog synthesizer. So I can go with the Sam, for example, and that will have a different character. So again, I'm doing this manually, but now let's assign that to an envelope. So what is an envelope? Now, this is great in Pigments to learn and to see exactly those components. You will find envelopes all over the place in synthesis and synthesizers. And so I'm going to use the first one here and show you this. I'm going to go back to the default template. So we'll just get started with something, and I'm going to set this to somewhere here. Now, for us to understand this idea, we're going to use this on the volume, on how the sound evolves and generated here. So we have envelope 1, this one, and it is already hardwired. It is connected to the VCA, to the voltage controlled amplifier. And so that's connected to our amplifier, so to speak, and the volume. So right now, when I'm playing anything and I'm releasing getting my hand off the keyboard, the sound just stops immediately. But what I can do is I can extend that, and that's the release. So I can have that somewhere around 1 second. So when I stop playing, it takes a little bit more time to fade away. So that's the release. But the attack is something very similar, but on the other side. It will be how much time would it take for the sound to reach its maximum velocity. So that's the attack. Right now, it's like almost nothing or nothing. So it'd be very fast, but it can be very slow. Now, there is two other components here. We have the decay and we have the sustain. So the sustain will be the amount, that will be the velocity, the gain, the volume, as long as I keep pressing my finger on the keyboards. So that's going to be the sustained volume. But the decay would be how much time would it take for the synthesizer to drop into that sustained level? Should it be different than the maximum velocity? So right now, our sustain is all the way, but I can take it like 50%, around 50%. And the decay can be half a second or so. And so what I'm expecting to happen here, let's have this 200 milliseconds. So this setting is going to be 200 milliseconds until we get to the most velocity, or the top velocity. And then it will take about half a second to drop into 50% of the velocity. And finally, it will take some 1 second to fade away when I lift my fingers off the keyboard. So you hear that drop. So that is an envelope. Now I can assign this to different parameters. I can use this, for example, on the filter. So let me show you. I'm going to just set this differently. And we can use the filter here. I can click this plus, but let me show you something else. So I can use envelope 2. And once I hover on top of the title, it's going to just change into a sign. So I'm going to just drag that and drop it right here. And I see the orange marking. And I'll see this clock here. And I can set this the way I want it. So now when I play something, envelope 2 will control how the filter will open and close. So basically what happens is that the filter starting point is somewhere here, like 146 hertz. But when I play, it will open up and then finally it will close whatever I do with this envelope. I mean, that's going to be slower attack, will be slower opening. And then it drops immediately. Why is that? Because we have that sustain. You see the sustain. So I can have the sustain all the way up 100%. 100%. It means that I'm going to stay, as long as I'm pressing my finger on the keyboard, it's going to keep on playing at the same volume. And when I'm lifting my finger off the keyboard, it will almost immediately shut down back. So that's the release. I can have that longer. And it slowly closes. So another basic idea and another way for us to do modulations. So what next? Let me show you some other stuff that you can do here. Very, very easy stuff. Going into the effects. Right now, we don't have any effects except delay and reverb that are part of the default preset. And the dry wet means that we are dry, meaning there's only the original sound, but nothing goes through the effect. So I can just turn that on. Right, so I'm going back into the synth, and we're going to just have that a little bit more faster. We don't need that. And so now we have that. And we have time, we have feedback. And that goes then into the reverb. We can just dial it back, but have more of the reverb. Right, and we can add more stuff here. I can go and find something else like chorus right after reverb. I don't know if it makes sense, but I don't care. I mean, we're experimenting. Right. So very easy sound design. I mean, in very few moves. And so that's the basic stuff that I wanted to show you guys. Let's see what else. So I can go back to the synth here and show you something else. So we can add a second engine here, and that can be a sampler. Let's turn off engine 1. Right, and so we have this electric piano. I can click this title here and get something else. Let's try something like bells and mullets. And we can add engine 1. And again, we have the volume here. We have the filter mix, so we can send engine 1 to filter 1 and engine 2 to filter 2. So that's something you can do. And we can go on and on. So now we have like a basic sound, and we can experiment with this. So I can change the basic the waveforms here, and there are tons of stuff that they added to Pigments 4. So I can go with this one, for example, double click, and it looks a little bit more complex. And we can again go back to the effects and experiment with that. For example, I can change the reverb to the shimmer reverb, which is new in Pigments 4. And you can hear that shimmering effect. Changing the size. Adding some modulation. And we can dial it back just a bit and then go back to our synth here. And again, try something else. Let's change, instead of wavetable, we can use the harmonic engine. And that is additive. That is additive synthesis. We are adding more and more partials. We're creating sounds. So that's really great stuff. And you can see that there's tons of stuff right here below. Lots of controls, which I'm not going into. And I've already explained those in a separate video about the harmonic engine. So watch that. And it's great. So you can create super interesting sounds here. And if you're using modulation, and you can change, for example, this ratio here. I mean, I can click this and use envelope 1. So this is really the basics of sound design. You can start with something very, very simple and go and experiment. Or if you know what you're doing, you can create almost any sound, anything that you hear. And that brings me to talk about, do you really need another synthesizer? So if you have this one, do you still need, I don't know, Serum? Do you still need maybe Hive 2? Well, each one will have its own sound banks, and if you're not sure or you don't know how to create the sounds, makes sense completely. I have tons of synthesizers, and I don't care. I love it. I have them. But if you're thinking, I need one or two, do I really need another one? Well, you can create with Pigments pretty much anything you hear with other synthesizer. I'm pretty sure about that. Let me know in the comments if you think otherwise. And I'm sure there will be people that will say, Udi, you're full of it. It's nonsense. There are some sounds that are only possible with other synthesizers, or maybe other synthesizers might have different filters that feel that the sound different. I agree. Fine. I get it. But still, for mostly, all these synthesizers will have the same components, and with some knowledge, some practice, you can create almost any sound with those. And of course, I agree, each will have maybe a different delays, different effects, right? So, of course, but still, if you have this one, I'm sure you're set for a long time. I mean, we have a sampler, we have harmonic engine, we have wavetable. You can, by the way, you can add your own samples. You can bring in your own samples, and there are tons of stuff you can do here in Pigments. And so now I'm going to just flick through some of the presets to get you some ideas of Pigments 4. And I'll be happy to dive into anything else, and if I can. And so leave me comments. I really want to hear, what do you think? Should we do an additional lessons like this and go through this? If you look through my channel, you'll find a lot of Pigment sound design step by step. I just go from the default preset and take you a step by step until you find the sound, until we create the sound. And I'm also covering pretty much everything you need to know about pigments. I mean, I covered version 1 and 2 and 3. And version 4, well, there are some additions, but nothing crazy is different. It's still the same engines, it's still the same modulation ideas. So all the information is in my channel. That's it. Please consider subscribing. It really helps me. Please consider leaving a comment. It is giving me some indication for what I need to do, or if I need to add anything or anything like that. And you are most welcome to join my Discord server where we can talk directly. You can talk with me. Also, by the way, if this helped you, consider clicking the thanks button and maybe join the channel membership. And if you join the channel membership, you will get discounts and coupons and sessions directly with me one-on-one and free plugins. Almost every month, I give out free plugins to my members. And that is it for today. Thank you so much, and I'll see you soon. Bye-bye.